This is the kind of crime that sounds made up the moment you hear it. A robber in a yellow safety vest attacks an armored car guard outside a bank, grabs roughly $400,000, runs into the brush, dives into a creek, and disappears. When police rush in and start looking for the suspect, they find something almost ridiculous. The area is full of men dressed almost exactly like him, all standing around, expecting to start a day's work they were promised through Craigslist. The crime happened on September 30th, 2008, outside a Bank of America branch in Monroe, Washington. The man behind it was later identified as Anthony Curcio, then 28 years old, a local former high school star athlete who had once earned football and basketball scholarships. According to court records, had spent months planning the robbery in obsessive detail. This was not a spur-of-the-moment smash and grab. It was a rehearsed production, complete with wardrobe, timing, staging, and human props who had no idea they had been cast in a crime. Before the robbery, Curcio had already been thinking like a planner, not just a thief. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office, he first developed the idea of robbing an armored car while working for his parents' landscaping company at the Nakamura Courthouse in Seattle. As his money problems worsened, he focused on armored car deliveries to the Monroe Bank of America branch. He watched the route, studied the schedule, and considered escape options. Prosecutors later said he planned the job over nearly a year and specifically highlighted the hours he spent observing the bank and setting up the escape. Curcio did not just want to rob the armored car guard. He wanted to vanish into confusion. So he placed a fake Craigslist ad for laborers with landscaping experience, offering work in Monroe. The men who replied were sent instructions telling them where to meet and what to wear: safety glasses, a ventilator or painter's mask, yellow safety vest, long-sleeved shirt, if possible, blue. In other words, he used the language of an ordinary workday to assemble a crowd of accidental doubles. The workers were told to show up near the bank at 11 a.m. on the morning of the robbery. HistoryLink reports that the directions sent them to 2 nearby locations, including an Albertsons parking lot and Eagle Park, both close to the branch and the intersection of Old Owen Road and Highway 2. About a dozen men turned up, dressed more or less the way they had been instructed, expecting a supervisor, a paycheck, and a landscaping job. Instead, they were unknowingly positioned as camouflage. They were not accomplices. They were decoys who had been crowdsourced out of the classifieds. The heist did not just rely on a mask or a getaway route. It relied on strangers trusting a job listing. It weaponized the normal boredom of employment. People were not lured there with some dramatic scheme. They came because somebody offered hourly pay for outdoor work. That small, mundane detail makes the case feel even stranger. The decoys were not recruited from the underworld. They were recruited from the world of ordinary people trying to make a day's wage. Then came the morning itself. Curcio dressed like the men he had summoned. According to the U.S. attorney, he wore a wig, a face mask, and clothing designed to be removed quickly. He posed as a landscaper outside the bank, even pretending to spray weeds while he waited for the armored car delivery. It is one of the most surreal images in the case. Not a masked bandit lurking in an alley, but a fake grounds worker blending into a small-town roadside scene. Just another man in workwear, apparently busy, apparently harmless, waiting for the exact right second. At about 11:04 a.m., the armored car guard was outside with cash bags when Curcio made his move. He rushed the guard, sprayed him in the face with pepper spray or mace, and snatched the money. The amount later established was about $400,000. The guard was treated at the one scene for exposure to the spray and released. It happened fast, and then, instead of peeling out in a car or vanishing on foot through a back alley, the robber ran across the road and headed for Woods Creek. Witnesses chased him. He shed parts of the disguise as he ran. Then came the detail that would turn a serious robbery into one of the strangest crime stories in Washington state. He got into the creek and escaped on a flotation device. HistoryLink says the yellow inner tube was later found about 200 yards away. The U.S. Attorney's Office described it more broadly as an inflatable raft and added that Curcio had strung a cable in the creek to help pull himself away from the scene. The nickname almost wrote itself, D.B. Tuber, a nod to D.B. Cooper, except with less sky and more creek water. That nickname spread because people could not quite believe what they were hearing. A broad daylight armored car robbery using Craigslist decoys and a water escape. But the underlying facts were real enough that even experienced investigators reportedly said they had not seen a tactic like it before. It had the structure of a movie caper and the texture of an internet-age fever dream. There is a temptation with a case like this to admire the ingenuity too much. The judge later stressed that what happened to the victim was tragic and that the crime's cleverness did not make it dashing. He was also troubled by the danger the decoy scheme created. Filling the area with innocent men dressed like the suspect could have exposed them to real harm if the situation had escalated or if armed guards had misidentified somebody. The plan was inventive, yes. It was also reckless in a way that makes the comedy of the premise darker the more you think for a while. Though it looked as if the bizarre plan had worked. The robber was gone. The bank was behind him. The scene was packed with visual noise, and that is one of the most fascinating parts of this case. Curcio did not create invisibility. He created ambiguity. He made witnesses and first responders process a scene full of repeated visual signals. Yellow vest, blue shirt, mask, safety gear. He did not need everybody to believe the same lie. He only needed the truth to take a few minutes longer to sort out. In a robbery, those minutes can feel like a lifetime. If the story ended there, it would live on as one of those unsolved legends people retell whenever they talk about perfect crimes. But it did not end there, because all elaborate plans eventually run into ordinary reality. In Curcio's case, reality arrived in the form of small mistakes, physical evidence, and one observant person who noticed something odd long before the robbery ever took place. According to prosecutors, a homeless man had watched Curcio during one of his dry runs near the bank weeks earlier. He saw him retrieve disguise items from near a dumpster and thought the behavior was suspicious enough to note the license plate number. A man can map routes, stage decoys, plan timing, build a creek escape, and still get undone because one stranger notices him acting weird. It is a reminder that plenty of crimes are not solved by genius duels between masterminds. They crack because people are good at sensing when something is off. The elaborate part gets all the headlines. The suspicious little moment by the dumpster is what begins to close the trap. Investigators also had something even more concrete. The robber had discarded parts of the disguise while fleeing. The face mask, wig, and hat left behind became evidence. Prosecutors later said authorities obtained DNA from a drink bottle and compared it to DNA from the discarded items and the samples matched. In other words, this case was not solved only by the strange beauty of a witness noticing a rehearsal. It was also solved by the blunt fact that once you leave your disguise in the escape route, it stops being costume and starts being evidence. After the robbery, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Curcio went on what they described as a wild spending spree. He took friends and his girlfriend to Las Vegas on an all-expense-paid trip, bought luxury items, and was later arrested in a new Range Rover after a shopping spree at an outlet mall. Some $220,000 of the stolen money was eventually recovered. This is the classic collapse of criminal glamour. The planning is disciplined. The aftermath gets sloppy. The fantasy shifts from control to consumption. Before that, you can almost see why the media latched onto the caper angle, the fake job ad, the matching outfits, the inner tube. But the spending spree strips away any illusion that this was some elegant, anti-establishment performance art. It was still greed. It was still violence. It was still a man taking real risks with other people's safety for money he started burning through almost immediately. The absurdity remains, but the spell of coolness breaks. Curcio ultimately pleaded guilty on May 5, 2009. And on July 27, 2009, he was sentenced in federal court to 72 months in prison, plus supervised release. The U.S. Attorney's Office noted that the judge compared aspects of the scheme to the kinds of crimes seen in films like the Thomas Crown Affair, especially the use of lookalikes to create confusion. But he rejected any romantic spin and emphasized the violence and danger. Years later, HistoryLink reported that after his release, Curcio said addiction had played a major role in the spiral that led him to the robbery, and that he had spoken at schools about the dangers of drug abuse and crime. That does not erase what happened. It does, however, add a final layer to the story. The same case that reads like a bizarre modern movie also fits into a much older true crime pattern: promise, decline, rationalization, escalation, punishment, then some attempt to reclaim meaning afterward. The inner tube is what everybody remembers. Maybe that is why this robbery lingers in public memory more than many more conventional cases. Most armored car robberies blur together in the mind. This one refuses to. It has staging, it has costume, it has an online bait-and switch, it has a creek escape that sounds like a movie, and yet every absurd element is tethered to paperwork, evidence bags, sentencing remarks, and a victim who had to live through it. The humor comes from the unbelievable logistics. The shock comes from the fact that those logistics were real. There is also something very 2008 about it. Not just the Craigslist posting, but the mood of the era. Bank anxiety, internet trust, local life colliding with increasingly strange forms of fraud and spectacle. Curcio's scheme feels like a bridge between old-school robbery and online age manipulation. He did not hack a system. He social engineered a scene. He understood that clothing, timing, and expectation could be as useful as a weapon. He turned the appearance of legitimate work into cover for theft. That is part of what makes the case feel oddly ahead of its time. And maybe the strangest part of all is that the most memorable image is not the money. It is not even the bank. It is the yellow safety vest, the costume of routine, the uniform of people who build, clean, fix, and maintain. In this story, that uniform becomes disguise, shield, misdirection, and symbol all at once. The robber did not hide by standing apart. He hid by looking useful. That detail gives the whole case its eerie edge. It is funny in a disbelieving way, but it is also unsettling because it reminds you how easily normalcy can be staged. So when people call Anthony Curcio the Craigslist robber or DB tuber, they are really trying to name the thing that makes the story stick. Not just the crime itself, but the surreal collision of ordinary working life and outlandish criminal theater. A fake day job, a real robbery, innocent decoys, a creek escape, a careful plan brought down by evidence and attention. It is shocking because it happened. It is funny because the method sounds absurd. And it is unforgettable because, somehow, both of those things are true at the same time.